everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, right as you were saying that, I looked up on the upper right-hand corner of my screen and saw Tuesday, May 13th, and I thought, that can't be right. It's not already the middle of May. But Tony, as it turns out, I am being informed right now, it is in fact the middle of May. We're already a month into the Ohio State football offseason following the spring game. I don't know how that happened. This is, I don't want to say unprecedented because they are eventually a month into the offseason every year, but this feels like it got here faster this year for some reason.
It did, and we're finally starting to get some network and game airings, not necessarily any kickoff times yet, but things are starting to look very much like May. And I'm sure even as I'm recording this and I've got the windows open because it's very nice out, there's going to be a neighbor mowing pretty soon. This is Buckeye Weekly after all. Something is going to happen because I just remembered I did not have the windows closed. But that's neither here nor there until it's right outside the window.
Until they set off the Wednesday tornado siren a day early just because they find out we're recording. Yes, which is, I don't want to say impossible because we've all lived through soccer benches and gators and trucks backing up and all of the other majesty that is the Buckeye Weekly Podcast Sonic Experience.
Majesty, Sonic Experience, I like all of that. Very, very, very good. I would normally title a show things like that, but instead we're going to talk about some breakout Buckeyes today on offense, 5 breakout Buckeyes. And Tom, I'm interested to see what you have to say on this. I think everybody's got some guys in mind, and I'm sure we're going to agree on some of these, but I think for the purposes of what is a breakout Buckeye, what does breakout mean? It's just somebody that you haven't necessarily seen do what they're going to do as a Buckeye to this point. It may mean new starter, new Buckeye, just guys that have not yet done it. And as I'm going through this, I'm thinking, is Carnell Tate, does he count? It's like, well, he can't. I mean, he had 50 catches and 700 yards last year. I don't think we can consider him a breakout guy, but I'll let you go first, and we'll just go back and forth, and we'll talk this out, and we'll talk about expectations for these guys and what will make them break out. So go ahead, Tom. What do you got?
All right, and I think my big concern on this is I have too many names written down because there are too many potentially intriguing players, which is not actually a problem when it comes down to the team and the coaching staff and what they have to work with this year. It will be how could you not mention, and I thought about, I forgot to put this guy's name, which I should have had like second or third on my list. So, all right, well, we'll start with the one that I think is probably the one that both of us would have at the top of our list, because this is someone we both mentioned in terms of just guys we were most excited to see overall this year, regardless of side of the ball, regardless of new player, and that is James Peoples. It just feels like there's going to be you're looking to replace a couple very, very talented running backs. So it is not going to be easy to just copy and paste, put in, he's going to do exactly what Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins did last year. Cause that was a lot. That was a fantastic season for both of those guys. But boy, all the stuff that you're sort of seeing, all the stuff that you're sort of hearing, all the way they're sort of acting, everyone seems to be acting as if they know that James Peoples is going to step right in and do a really, really good job for this team. And with both of those guys ahead of him now gone, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for him to get the ball. And with a first-time starting quarterback, you have the feeling that they're probably going to want to establish it on the ground to a certain degree this year. So, yeah, I think James Peoples is my first name here, and I'm guessing he was probably at or near the top of your list as well.
Yeah, he was at or near the top of my list as well. And what I did is I went through and looked at all of the Ohio State starting running backs under Ryan Day, or their leading rushers, I should say, because Travion Henderson started most of the season, but Quinshon Judkins was the leading rusher last year. But here's what I found out, Tom, and this is just the only thing that nobody else has discovered this. Starting running backs at Ohio State under Ryan Day have averaged 188 carries, 1,174 yards, and 12 touchdowns. And if you told me that James Peoples had 1,174 yards this year, averaging 6.2 yards per carry and scored 12 touchdowns, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. Like those are all pretty decent numbers. And when you consider maybe CJ Donaldson as the bigger back, maybe he's going to vulture some of those touchdowns. That's why there's only 12 and not more, because we've seen J.K. Dobbins had 21 in 2019. But he also then Trey Sermon only had 4 in 2020. That was a shortened season, but they're 1,174 yards, Tom. You know what that means. I'm going to have to set the over-under on that, because I think that's a pretty fair number, and I do think he's going to be over 1,000. And then it just gets to, how far in the playoffs are you going to go? That would give me a better idea. But 1,174 would be the most of any running back since TreVeyon Henderson's freshman year of 1,255.
And what's interesting here is, as you said, you don't know how far they're going in the playoffs because, both of those guys got to 1,000 yards rushing and 10 touchdowns on the ground last year, but it took them 16 games to do it. So that's, that's a big number, but I also don't know that you're going to have as much of a 50-50 split this year as you had last year. That's what really kind of throws me, because if it is a 50-50 split, then those numbers are pretty aspirational. Like if you can get to 1,172 yards and 12 touchdowns, splitting carries 50-50, boy, that really is probably a very good season on the ground for the Buckeyes. I don't know that I see them getting there if it's a 50-50 split, but I don't know that I see it being a 50-50 split. So, Tony, it's May. I can be optimistic. I will say over on the yardage and the touchdowns. I will rely on the fact that no one will come back and check this later in the season and mock me if I'm wrong. But I think the reason I feel like it's really plausible that they can is because I don't think you're going to see quite as even a division of carries as you did last year.
That's where I am as well. I just keep having this 1,200 yards in my mind for James Peoples, and it doesn't. I mean, that's 16 games. That's 75 yards a game. Like that's very, very, very doable. So I do think he's going to go over on both of those. So Tom, that you took off. You took one of my guys. How about this? This is maybe the most obvious, provided he wins the quarterback battle, is Julian Sayin. Because if you're the quarterback at Ohio State, and you're the first time starting quarterback at Ohio State, you're going to be on everybody's radar. You're going to be talked about. We know there's a lot of things put on your plate. You're going to be seen everywhere, and it's just a lot of attention being that. So you're going to break out whether you like it or not. And hopefully you like it, because that means you're playing well. If you don't like it, it's because things are not going super well for you, or some of the criticism gets a little bit out of hand. But I do think Julian Sayin, and really you could pick whichever quarterback you want and just put them as a placeholder in terms of a breakout player. Because, Tom, I can give you the averages under Ryan Day again since he took over in 2017 as the offensive coordinator. And you tell me how you like these passing stats. 3,570 yards, 37 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Now, that's a very good season. It's a very average season under Ryan Day, and I think you'd probably take that right now, considering Will Howard last year, 4,010 yards, 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. You figure those passing yards might be a little bit low. The 3,570 on average might be a little bit low for this season if they get to go where they are, because I don't know the running game that they had last year. I don't know that they'll have it this year, or they'll choose to have it this year. And then you figure some of that average is also the 2020 season where they threw for 2,100 yards, but these things even out because you've got the Dwayne Haskins 2018 season in there where they threw for 4,800 yards, and they're not doing that again. So I think these numbers are, I think this is a pretty good idea of what to expect from whatever quarterback is starting this year. And even Kyle McCord was 3,170 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I think whoever wins this is over on those first two numbers, and frankly probably over on interceptions as well. But Tom, 3,570 yards is the average, 37 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That's what I'm thinking for kind of a season that Julian Sayin can expect if he is the starter. And I'm picking him to be the starter, so he will be the starter.
That sounds about right. Again, and I think there's a question as to how close is the quarterback battle, and is there a very clear 1 versus 2? Last year, backup quarterback Devin Brown threw a grand total of 20 passes, and Julian Sayin threw 12 passes. I'm guessing that if it is, whoever the starter is this year, the second string guy is going to throw more than 20 passes and probably more than 32 passes. So you're probably going to divide it up a little bit more. But the track record is the track record at Ohio State. And every time I kind of think, well, you've got a young quarterback, you then start saying, well, but you do have Jeremiah Smith, and you do have Carnell Tate, and you do have Brandon Innes, who we will probably talk about in a minute. You got other receivers that we'll probably talk about in a minute. And you got a tight end we'll probably talk about in a minute. You've got so many weapons in that pass game that, with as good as I think the running game could be this year, that's really going to open things up in the pass game to a certain degree. And you're going to have Jeremiah Smith on the field. And if you have Jeremiah Smith on the field, you're going to do some cool stuff in the passing game. So yeah, I think my concern there with going over on all of that stuff is, how are they going to divide things up? And is it going to be an even, a little bit more of a, divided up situation at quarterback in terms of the stats than it was last year? It could be, but at the same time, if someone has won the quarterback job, and we'll just say it's Julian Sayin right now, but just because you have said it, you've said it, so therefore it will happen. If he has clearly won the quarterback job, he is a first year starter, so you do need to get him as many reps as you can. So, and the other piece of this is, how good is the defense is going to be? Because the whole reason that Dwayne Haskins had the numbers he had in 2018, there were two reasons. Number one, they couldn't run the ball particularly well. I don't think that's going to be an issue this year. But number two, the defense was not very good, and the defense gave up a lot of points. If you're giving up 9 points a game or whatever it was last year for Ohio State, you don't need to score that much to have the game kind of comfortably in reach. If you're giving up 17 points a game, which is still not a bad season, then you've got to keep the foot on the pedal a little bit more, and you're going to probably be throwing the ball a little bit more. So that probably pushes those numbers up. So I'm going to say I'm more confident that James Peoples goes over those over-under numbers than I am Julian Sayin.
Okay, understood. I hear you. What do you got next?
Let's see. Let's do Max Klare. Max Klare, boy, he just was so productive for Purdue. More than 600 yards receiving. You saw it a little bit in the spring game. They don't throw to the tight ends that much. I don't think you're going to see a 600-yard receiving season for Max Klare. I don't think. And I think you might see, I don't know what the record for touchdown receptions in a season for an Ohio State tight end is, but that might be in jeopardy this year. It feels like you've just got, if you can run the ball and if you've got a Jeremiah Smith out there, then you can't double everyone. And it just feels like this is a receiving threat at tight end that they really have not had. He's more of a receiving threat than Cade Stover, and Cade Stover was a really good receiver at Ohio State, especially in his last season. And it just feels like you could see something you haven't seen out of the tight end position in quite a while out of Max Klare. He doesn't have to be the number one target for the quarterback like he was at Purdue in a lot of cases last year, but he just feels like someone who's going to be a mismatch. He feels like he's going to put up, Colston Loveland type numbers, maybe, where you're not putting up 150 yards a game or anything like that, but man, he's just so consistently getting 5 catches for 65 yards or 70 yards and a touchdown. And you do that enough, you stack enough of those over the course of a season, and all of a sudden you end up with some really impressive numbers. Again, I don't think he's putting up 1,000 yards. I don't think he's putting up 800 yards. 600 yards for Purdue last season, that feels like maybe that's kind of the over-under for me. I don't remember. It was 600 and some change, I think, for him last year with Purdue. But, 600 yards and, I don't know, 9 touchdowns, something like that. Is that outrageous to say that might be the number, something in that range?
600 yards, 9 touchdowns. I don't think that's outrageous. I would take the under just because I want to see it. I was looking to see what the season record for a tight end is at Ohio State for touchdowns. They don't have it in terms of touchdowns in a season. They have touchdowns in a career, which is Jake Stoneburner with 13. Jeremy Ruckert had 12. So I don't think he's going to get there.
Yeah, no.
Not this year. But if he stays for an extra year, wouldn't shock me if he does that. Of course, the receptions by a tight end in OSU the season record is 45. John Frank did in 81 and 83. Cade Stover had 41 in 2023. Jeff Ellis had 40 in 1988. Those are the only 4 times a tight end has caught 40 passes. And Tom, if you're ballparking, you're eyeballing 600 yards, I assume you're thinking at least 40 passes, because I'm not expecting Max Klare to be averaging over 15 yards a catch. And boy, you have to wonder, like, say 40 catches for this guy and 600 yards. To me, that means a higher scoring offense, because like then he's just running free an awful lot, and they're moving the chains, and defenses have really no answer then for this offense. So I think I do think he's going to be kind of a breakout guy. I think for me, the numbers that I would throw out there is just if he can do what Cade Stover did, which is right around what you said, it's 4,100 or 41 catches, 576 yards, 5 touchdowns. If I'm going to take the over on any of those, I'm probably taking the over on touchdowns, because I think he can be a sneaky red zone threat.
Yeah, of those numbers, the 5 touchdowns is the easy over there. No question. It just seems like it is going to be such a pick your poison offense for Ohio State. And you're probably going to have Will Kazmarek in there. You're going to run a lot of 12 personnel down in the goal line anyway. So it's, say it's Jeremiah Smith on one side and Carnell Tate on the other, and Kazmarek and Max Klare at tight end. And then you've got James Peoples in the backfield, and you can only double so many guys, even in the red zone where everything's sort of compacted down. If it's one-on-one with Jeremiah Smith, the ball's going to him. So you figure you're going to at least have a safety shaded over that way. It just feels like you leak a tight end out somewhere, and you pick up an easy pitch and catch 6-yard touchdown kind of reception. It just feels like you're going to see one of those every week or so with him. So yeah, I'll definitely go over 5 touchdowns for sure.
And I think some of those red zone touchdowns can be 17-yard catches down the seam as well, where everything is spread out and they still find Max Klare there. My next guy, Tom, is a guy that you mentioned, Brandon Inniss, as the slot receiver, the number 1 slot receiver. And the thing that we've talked about in this show in the past is, since Urban Meyer arrived, that slot receiver has been a prolific piece of the offense. Since Ryan Day arrived in 2017, it's led the team in receptions several times. I'm not expecting that this year, but it is a big piece of the offense. And you can even go back to 2018, when the 2 leading receivers were Paris Campbell and KJ Hill, and they just split time in the slot and combined for 170 catches and almost 1,900 yards. But the average starting slot receiver in OSU's offense since Ryan Day took over, 67 catches, 907 yards, 8 touchdowns. And these all feel, except for maybe touchdowns, these all feel a little high for me for Brandon Inniss this year, because I do think he and Bryson Rodgers are going to split some time, and we know that they're going to play a lot of 12 personnel. So somebody's going to be the odd man out of the receivers there, and it's probably going to be Brandon Inniss or that slot receiver when they are in 12 personnel. So I'm the 67 for 907 and 8 touchdowns. I'm thinking I'm probably going to go under on all of those. And then I'm just looking at other past receiving seasons for slot receivers, like Emeka Egbuka in 2023 when he was hurt was 41 for 515 for 4. I think that's a number that is more in line with what we would expect from Brandon Inniss, but also all of those numbers also feel a little low for what I would expect. So maybe there's a KJ Hill one year was 57 catches, 636 yards, and 10 touchdowns. And maybe that's a little bit more of what to expect, although 10 touchdowns, I'm not sure. I just don't know how much of a run after the catch guy Brandon Inniss is going to be. I know he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. It just depends on how they use him and how much freedom he has after he catches the ball. Is there a lot of running room for him? How much is he going to be out in the middle of the field with opportunity to run? So I think I'll ask you this, Tom, as I just talk all over this and give you all of these numbers. Who has more catches, Brandon Inniss or Max Klare?
That's a great question. He, I mean, you go back to what I said, the scenario I laid out, and they're in 12 personnel in the red zone. And the name that I didn't say was Brandon Innes, because you figure you take your slot guy off the field for your second tight end. And I think that might keep his numbers down a little bit. And I think the Bryson Rogers aspect that you mentioned might keep his numbers down a little bit. And there are other talented wide receivers that they're going to be looking to get on the field. You also wonder, they learned a lot last year in terms of load management with some of these guys and rotation with some of these guys. And how much is Jeremiah Smith going to be playing in some of these games where they're potentially up by 3-4 touchdowns early in the third quarter? So maybe he's the guy who comes off. There's so many different moving parts and pieces here. I think I'm going to go with Max Klare ahead of Brandon Innes slightly in terms of receptions, slightly. But I mean, I think we're talking, 40-38 or 42-40 or something like that. I think Innes is going to have a productive year, certainly. And, by far the best year of his career. And I think he's going to be someone who is definitely someone that opposing defensive coordinators are sort of like rubbing their temples and figuring out, okay, we have to stop the two outside receivers. And then we also have to stop the tight end. And then the running back's really good. And then, oh yeah, by the way, the slot guy was the number one receiver in his class coming out of high school. So there are just going to be matchup issues all over the field for opposing defensive coordinators. The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm thinking, boy, it sure seems like the slot guy for Ohio State is going to have more than 40 catches. Like, I don't think he's going to have 900 yards, but I don't think he's going to have 500 yards either. I think he's going to be somewhere in the middle. And boy, it really is pretty easy to talk yourself into 45 catches for 720 yards and 7 touchdowns or something like that for him. So I think I have talked long enough that now I've talked myself into Brandon Innes with more receptions than Max Klare, but once again, just slightly.
The key to always being right is giving several different answers to one question, Tom, and you've succeeded in that one. Last year, Brandon Innes had 14 catches, 176 yards, 1 touchdown. If you triple everything, you're talking like 42 catches for 525 yards. I think tripling is good enough for a breakout. But it's going to be fascinating to see, because he'll also do some of the jet sweeps, the fly sweeps, where it's a cheap catch and you can build some numbers there. I am looking forward to seeing how that all shakes out. Tom, who is the last guy?
Well, this is one of these things where I think on one of the last shows, I think you maybe even mentioned Mylan Graham. And so it's like I had him very high on my list, but I don't think I'm going to actually say his name right now, other than where I just did a minute ago. That didn't count. I think instead, Tony, I'm going to say Ethan Onyanwa's name. And I think he is someone who you look at the, Josh Simmons is kind of the benchmark there for transfer left tackle. And Josh Simmons came in and was a multi-year guy coming in, and he came in from San Diego State, which is probably the San Diego State he came in from is probably a little ahead of the Rice that Ethan Onyanwa came in from. But Onyanwa came in as someone who was being talked about as potentially a second-round draft pick last year. And if he has a good year this year, and you would think he is in a spot where he's positioned to have a good year this year, he potentially could work his way up into the first round somewhere. I don't know. Where did Josh Simmons go? 37? So something like that.
32.
Maybe that's the over-under here for Ethan Onyanwa, where does he get drafted next year, something like that, because you're not going to necessarily have the stats that you have for the skill guys. But he just seems like someone who, of all the names we've talked about, he might be one of the people who has the biggest say in terms of where they really finish up. Because there's lots of talented wide receivers that they have on this team. And if Max Klare doesn't have an incredible season, they've got plenty of other skill guys that they could get the ball to. But you need a left tackle. You really need a good season out of a left tackle. And you think about what Ohio State looked like when they had Josh Simmons at the beginning of the year, and the offense looked fantastic. You think about what the offense looked at the end of the season when Donovan Jackson was really sort of settled in there, and the offense looked fantastic. And then you go back to the Nebraska game where it was Zen Mahalski, and it just was like, this ain't it, Chief. And even Donovan Jackson's first game where he got beat a couple times because he was going up against a future top 5 NFL draft pick, the first time he'd ever played tackle in college. So that was not exactly a fair assignment for him. But you have seen kind of what a shaky left tackle can do to sort of derail your season. You can have seen the difference that a really good left tackle can make. It feels like he's going to be someone who has a big impact on just what the ceiling for this year's Ohio State team could be.
I like that one. I did not put him on my list because I knew you would. So instead, Tom, I went with a different offensive lineman, Luke Montgomery, who is going to go from starting the final 2 games last year to potentially, with enough attention, you can be an all-conference player, lineman, as we talk about on this show. Their name has to be out there for them to really generate some of that attention. But I think we all saw him close strong last year and was in that number 1 left guard spot all spring long. So I think we could see him blossom and really take that over. You know, you could say the same thing for Austin Siereveld being a full-time starter at right tackle if that's what happens. So I think the good thing is there are several players on that offensive line that could break out. And I know Carson Hinsman's a 2-year starter. He's still waiting to be the best center in the Big Ten or college football. You could go from part-time starter to Remington Award winner. I think that's a breakout for him if that were to happen. So I think the good news is that offensive line, you can go with anybody because they all have this level of experience, but they all have they're all going to be, we assume they're going to be pretty good, but nobody has any kind of accolade. Like none of these guys are all conference. Maybe Ethan Onianwa was in the CUSA where maybe there, but like none of these guys, they're all just like all honorable mention and just very minimal accolades conference wide. So I think any of those guys could really legitimately be a breakout, and it wouldn't be a shock if any of them were. Tom, you mentioned Mylan Graham, and he did not have a catch last year, but I also did write his name down, and I'm trying to wonder, like, we could just do an entire show on our expectations for Mylan Graham because I think we did one for Jeremiah Smith last year, but how about this? I went back and what if he's just an average of what Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson did as true freshmen? And Tom, those numbers, that average is 21 catches, 315 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
That feels realistic. That feels number 1, achievable, but number 2, you say those numbers out loud right now and everyone's going, that's it? Mm-hmm. But you got to remember, I mean, go ahead and take the number of passing yards that you think they're going to have this year. And it's, say it's 4,000. Okay. Is Jeremiah Smith going to have a 1,000-yard season? Okay, great. Cross 1,000 yards off there. Now you're down to 3,000. Is Carnell Tate going to have a 1,000-yard season this year? Okay, great. Now you're down to 2,000. Okay. Is Max Klare going to have a 600-yard season? Okay, now you're down to 1,400. And Brandon Inniss, he's going to have a 700. So now you're down to 700 yards. And, well, they're going to throw the ball to the running back out of the backfield a little bit. And this is just with a 1,000-yard season for Jeremiah Smith, not a 1,300-yard season. So, there are only going to be so many balls thrown to you as one of, whether you're the 4th or the 5th wide receiver in that rotation, because there are so many other guys in that, who are going to be getting the football thrown to them and also getting the football handed to them. And there are only so many snaps. And as we saw last year, they may be interested in limiting the number of snaps to a certain degree. So therefore that may drag some of those numbers down. So the long story short, yeah, I think that is a pretty good expectation. And yeah, those were true freshman numbers for those 2 guys, but also, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson were not behind Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss and Bryson Rogers and all the other guys that they have. And it seems like they may be running a little more 12 personnel than they did at times back then. So I think those are good numbers to use. And you got to remember, Chris Olave's freshman year was that 2018 year where they threw for all sorts of record-breaking numbers. So that's a little bit of a curve wrecker as well. So yeah, I think those are good numbers, and I think that would be a very successful second season for Mylan Graham, and that would set him up for, boy, is he the guy opposite Jeremiah Smith in 2026 on the outside? Boy, that's a pretty dynamic duo of wide receivers where by the time they're calling names in the 2027 NFL draft, you might get guys drafted back to back or top 10, top 15, like you had with Olave and Wilson. So yeah, in terms of a benchmark, that's probably a pretty good one, I think.
And Olave finished with 12 catches for 197 yards that year. 5 of those catches came in a Big Ten championship game against Northwestern. He had 2 against Michigan. So like the bulk of his catches came towards the end of the season when he was really no longer just a true freshman. So there you go. 5-ish or so breakout Buckeyes on offense. We'll have breakout Buckeyes on defense coming up for you in a later show. Of course, you can find us talking about all of these things at BuckeyeHuddle.com right now. First month, just $4.99. Welcoming in a bunch of new members now with the additions that we've made, bringing in Jeremy Birmingham. So you all know Birm. He's there now. Andrew Ellis is on the board chatting, talking about recruiting and all sorts of stuff with the football team. Of course, we've continued to build upon our X's and O's guys as well. So if you're into any of those things, and of course also the Ohio State football team, we are there as well talking about it. So you can find us there. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, we always appreciate a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. So thank you all for tuning in. That will do it for us. We will talk to you all later.